Hello. Today I want to go over how to create a multi-page bundled static website for publishing in GitHub Pages and reinforce some best practices for setting things up in terms of both GitHub and in terms of Vite and basic kind of HTML and JavaScript path syntax and stuff like that. So I'm going to go first in this case to GitHub online and just create a repo to begin with from GitHub. So I'm going to go to my repositories and create a new repository, and I'm going to call it front end portfolio. And this is a portfolio of Nicholas's front end web demos. Make it private because I have GitHub Pro, and so I can make pages sites from private repos, but you can make this public if you do not have that, so that you can actually use GitHub Pages. Otherwise you won't be able to. I'm going to add a README, and I'm going to add a unlicense. You can read about different types of licenses, but this one is just very open and lets people do pretty much whatever they want with my code if they get their hands on it. And I'll add a template for Node, although when I scaffold my site using Vite, it's probably going to override that git ignore. I just want to show you what it's like having some files already in your repository. So there's already an initial commit created here by github.com, and so we can't simply connect a full local repository and start pushing to this because it's not empty. So instead we're going to pull this down and then start working in that. So I'll go to git bash and I will git clone in the place I want to clone it. So I'm going to cd into code, which is where I keep my code, and cd into web, which is where I keep my web code, and I'll just ls and check if I have any front end named folders. I don't, so I will git clone this. And I will code to front end portfolio to open that in Visual Studio Code and bring that window over. I'm going to minimize the browser and open this up. So I have my README, and I want to probably adjust this to look a little nicer. Front end portfolio. It is made with Vite using the vanilla JavaScript option. It is configured to have multiple HTML pages rather than being a single page app. So that's good enough, and I'll go ahead and new terminal. I will git add readme, git commit -m updating readme, and go ahead. I can just push that later. So next I'm going to npm create Vite at latest. and I'm going to call the project, whoops, I always do this, I have to pass dot so it does it in the current directory. I'm going to have it ignore the existing files and continue. I'm going to have it use vanilla JavaScript, and then I'll npm I to install the necessary packages in node modules. And now what we have is the root of this project. It has node modules which are getting get ignored. You can see that in get ignore. We can also, it's been modified, you see, by Vite because it creates a get ignored to prevent things like node modules getting pushed up, for example. It has this public folder with the Vite SVG, and I can check that the Vite.svg is used in a couple places, one of which is index.html, which is the favorites icon, and I see that there's all this source code with the counter and this main.js, which is kind of creating like a single page app with this, where we're putting inner HTML here manually in the in this particular place inside of index.html. And I don't really want to do that because I want to have a multi-page app where I can develop kind of modular apps where they can all be served from this one place and linked together, but they're actually individual HTML files with individual JavaScript files being brought in. So to do that, I'm just going to delete the entire source directory because I don't need it, and that's going to cause some problems. So I will fix those problems. One of them is that we're no longer going to be using the app div in the body, and we're not going to have this script anymore, so we can delete that. I don't like the default title. I want to call this front end portfolio or front end demos. We'll call it portfolio. And I don't want the icon to be vite.svg, so we can check what this is going to look like, but I already know I'm not going to want vite.svg. And let's go ahead and just put something in the body so there's something to see. We'll call this the we'll say h1 and use the emit shortcut to do home, and say p, this is the home page, and I will npm run dev and open this up. So here we have a home page, pretty boring. We got rid of all those default styles. Seems to be working fine, but I have this little Vite SVG as the favorites icon, and I don't want that. I want something custom. So I'm going to open up Figma. Figma you can visit in the browser as well. It's a website, and you can sign in or create an account if you like. You can also create SVG images in PowerPoint and other drawing softwares. So the important thing is that you can create an image and that you can export it as an SVG. So here I'm just going to go and create some text. You see I already have this N right here, so I'm just going to type N, and then I can highlight that and pick the font I want. So I like this one. I can pick the size. It's going to get scaled up, so it's not a huge deal if it's a small size. And then this is going to be a scalable image, which is what I want. So I'm going to change the color, and I could pick any color, but I liked this particular color. So I will take this now, and it's text, and if I scroll down on this sidebar to export, I can select the file type as SVG, which is a scalable image type. So rather than mapping the pixels, it's actually figuring out how to recreate the image so that it can be very fine in detail, and you can zoom in forever on this essentially and get perfect clarity. So I'm going to export that as SVG, and I will rename this right here with Control. I'll click on the sidebar menu and click Control R and lowercase n as the name. So it's n.svg when it's exported. So I'll export n, and I will select my code folder and then web, and then this folder which is front end portfolio, and go into that public folder where the Vite SVG was. I can delete that if I want and save here n to where Vite was, and so then I can close Figma, And now if I look in the public folder, I have n.svg. So rather than vite.svg here, I'm going to do n. And this slash means at the root of the website. So when it's assets like this that are being imported, whether that's CSS or an SVG or JavaScript, Vite is going to be smart, and when it creates the bundle, it's going to do that from whatever the base of our website is. So since we are publishing in GitHub Pages, the base of our website is going to be something like github.io/ your username, so mine is njg4ne.github.io/ then the name of the repo, so in this case front-end portfolio, and that's going to be the name of the site. So you're getting this subpath of github.io, you're not getting the actual root here, so this can create problems with links and relative paths and all kinds of things. So it's very important that you test links when you're working on a subdirectory like this. But we can solve this problem using Vite when the code gets bundled, and also at development time, so that we don't have things acting differently at development, and we also we have everything working once it gets ultimately published. So we don't have a Vite config because it's so simple, this vanilla JavaScript project, but we will create that. vite.config.js is the file Vite is going to look for. And then in here, I'm just going to ask GitHub Copilot to create a default config that bundles both index and an about index in an about folder, and see how it does. Yeah, it seems to have done fine overall. This looks familiar to me. The only issue is that I don't want these to be full paths. So Vite is also going to do this by default. It's going to have a root of the wherever the Vite config.js file is in this root of this project, where Vite is going to be run from when we npm run dev or npm run build. You may hear some purring from a cat. And so we can actually use relative paths here, and Vite should be smart enough to figure this out. So we should be able to go all the way over to index.html, and then what we're planning to put is an about folder with an index.html. This is better for what we're going to be doing than making just simply a file called about.html. It's not that you can't do about.html, it's just that it will create some problems with links, and I can show you those problems if you want. So let's just start with an about.html. So we'll create a new file and call it about.html, and it's going to have the same contents as index, except it's going to be front-end portfolio dash about for the title, and then we'll call it about, and this is the about page. And I also want to show you, if we create an anchor tag that is a link, we will put the href here to be ... So whatever the page above about is, because we expect about to be nested under wherever we started. So the index, essentially the home page. So whenever we link to about, no matter where we link from, since about should be directly under home, then we should be taken back to home. Now, to navigate to about, we can easily create a link to about. Like, we can just simply say /about, and so dot says whatever window location this index file is being served from, it's going to be that, and then go to about.html, except we don't need an HTML extension. We just need to leave off a trailing slash here. If we do a trailing slash, it's going to go to an about folder and look for an index. If we do no trailing slash, it's going to find an HTML file. So let's check that out. So this is the home page, and let's see. We didn't put any text. Obviously, you can't see the link. But really, it's ./about. So this works fine when we're at home because home is going to contain about. And so here you see this works fine, but if I put about / now if I go back home, this is going to create a problem. So I just held the control key and hit refresh so that I didn't get a cached version from the browser. Sometimes the browser will cache really obvious pages, like simple pages like these. So I did control reload on home, and then now I see that it takes me to about / and it just stays on the home page. It doesn't actually leave to go to about. So why is that happening? Well, it's because / like I said, refers to the dot folder, and then the about subfolder of dot, and then in the about subfolder look for an index.html. So you don't actually have to add an index.html full type this out like index.html, and you really wouldn't want to do that either, because then when your users go to click on your about page link, it's going to take them to index.html in the browser bar, and that's not really a very good experience either. So it's better practice if you could just leave it like this. And so you just leave that trailing / off, because in this case you've had an about.html file, and so that's what that means. Now the problem here is that when we do an about.html file and we do /, well, these files are right beside each other. They are in the same directory. So if I say / for about, it is in the same directory as index. So saying .. the page above this page is not going to work like expected, because if we click / page, let's see, reload the home page and click to about, and then did we save this? Yes. Click to the about page. Now we go to the about page. What if on the about page we have that link to .. Go up one. Well, up one is going to actually be, there is no up one. We were already on the base. Here dot is home, and here dot is also home. So when we go up one, we're going to get just the base, but go up one from base, and you can't go any higher than base. So this is going to work fine on /, but this is going to become a problem when we go to use another base URL. So we need to specify so that Vite knows that we're going to end up building this and putting it at a certain place. We're going to have to tell it what that certain place is. So in the case of here, njg4ne.github.io, then I need to have this /frontend portfolio at the end of that. And so that is the place where this is going to take us. And that's where the code is going to be served out of as far as GitHub is concerned. So now when I go to do this, Vite has picked up on this, and you see when I click the link now, it's prepending this front-end portfolio part because it knows that's how our server is going to be set up. So now we go to the About page and we go up one. and it seems to work fine. But what if we went to the About page by a origin relative path? So typically when we want to have a navigation, like at the top of the page we have a nav, and we're going to put this on every page. Even though they're separate HTML files, we're going to put the same links to navigate the website on all the pages. So we might have slash for home and slash about for about. And so here you see that we're not using a dot slash because we don't want relative to the current page, wherever that is. We want it to be relative to the entire site. And so you would think that that would be this part of the front-end portfolio part, but the HTML is not that smart. Vite is smart, but the HTML is not that smart. So if we go to the home page and we control reload and we click on About, and now we already have an issue because About takes us to this /about, not to our subfolder. So it's not picking up on this piece, and that is something we could pull in with JavaScript, but we want maybe we want like search engines like Google to be able to view our page without having to have JavaScript dynamically injected in there. And so since we're only going to have our nav created in that once and then just copy and paste it in all our different subsites, we can easily just prepend that just for this. We really should not do that when we're making normal links that are relative, so ./about and ./ we shouldn't be doing absolute paths like this, but it's fine to do just for the navigation because it's going to make sure our navigation is knowing where our site is based. Now there are things like the base up here where you can set a base for all links on the page, on this particular HTML page, but that can become a little bit complicated when you start doing that on all your pages, and you have to set the base individually, and it just kind of becomes a mess. So you sort of want to go with the simplest solution you can. The fewer letters that you have to put in your path, the better generally. So, or the fewer slugs, which is like the part between the slashes. So here we're going to just put /about with no trailing slash because it's an HTML file, and we will control reload and click About, and now it works fine. So what happens when we go up one? Well, something I want you to pay attention to is look right down here in the lower left of the page. When you hover over a link, it's going to give you the path of where you're going with that link. So we're currently on the about.html file, and we have .. And so .. is telling us that localhost 5173 without the base is our dot slash. So if we put a / instead and we hover over that link, now we'll see that the same thing is true. Localhost 5173 is, oh sorry, I reloaded it, and now it's /frontend portfolio. So it's saying that About is in frontend portfolio, which is kind of true because our About file is right next to index inside of the base folder where our HTML is. So that's why if we want to use relative paths in a way that kind of makes more sense, it's easier if we can have an About subfolder in which we have an index.html, which would be that About file from before. So we'll just drag that About into here, rename it to index, and now add the trailing slash whenever we want to go to that place. So we'll add a trailing slash here and a trailing slash here, and I don't know where we got that other one. So this is our ./about, and this is our About. If I click About, it takes us to About. I can go up one now. Sorry, I still have it set to dot, so I want to be .. I can go to Home, and it takes us back home. I can click About, it takes us to About, and I can click Go Up one, and it takes us up one, and I can go to ./about, and it takes us to About relative to index. And so that's the best way I found to set up kind of the linking in here is you only have to specify this base path here, and not with things like your image imports or your CSS imports or your JavaScript, but just because of these links are kind of dumb in the sense that they don't necessarily know who the base that they're being hosted from is. They're just HTML. So if you can, use relative paths, but if you want something that's going to be general and work across your site, then you'll need to use this slash format. And to illustrate why that is, like let's say we want to have our same nav on every page. We would just copy that to the top of our body and about as well, and now all of a sudden we have the exact same navigation up here. But what happens if I change my about on the about page to be /about? You know, that would work on the home page because obviously /about worked here. So /about/ should work on about, right? Well, we go to about and then we click about. If we reload, and now we see, if you look closely at the link in the lower left, it's going to go to home because there's an error in that the link is trying to go to /about/about, and that's obviously not what we want. That's creating a problem for us. So instead we have to have that full path that this is going to be at on the site so that we can have our nav be consistent and just copy and paste this one piece of code into any different subsites that we're creating. By every time we're creating a new HTML file, it's like creating a new sub app of our overall multi-page app. So now we can go home, we can go about, we can go up one, we can go about, and we can go to about from about. So all that is working fine, and /about and up one are working fine as well. So it's always good to test those links, and if you're not sure what a link is going to do, just hover over it and you'll see its intended destination in the lower left there. So this is a good point. We have things working relatively well that we could commit. Let's say git add dot get status, and I'll say git commit -m setting up basic multi-page app. Okay, looks good. Now I'm also going to want to make sure that it builds and previews, so I'll do a npm run build. Whoops, npm, and we get an error because it can't resolve about.html, which makes sense because we actually renamed it to index.html under about. So now it builds fine, and we can preview it, and we can double check that everything looks like it's going to look on the hosted location, which is this base path. We can click all the links and they do what they're supposed to do and don't create any errors. We can go up one and down one. Everything looks just the same as it did before, so that's a good success for me. And we notice that it's being distributed into this new dist folder, but since on GitHub Pages we only have one option to have our source code separate from our static site that we're actually serving, essentially the built version of our site versus the source code version of our site. We only have one option to put that on the same branch as our source code, and the name of that specifically has to be docs. So we will say the outdir is going to be docs for this, and we can go ahead and delete that dist folder because we don't need that, and we can build it again into the docs folder. Nothing in here should be different, so I'm not going to test it again, and everything seems to look good there. Now problem that we could have is if we didn't set things up with the bundler correctly with the base path right here. If we tried to import any JavaScript, we might have issues with our built site. So let's try to see what that would look like. If we were in, we'll create a new source code folder since we're going to be creating source, and it would be good if at some point we can get our HTML in there as well, because our root is getting quite busy. It would be better if we could put this all in a source code folder, or we could create an HTML folder if we wanted to. So we'll just create a new file called test.js. We'll say get a button with ID test and alert hi when clicked. So it's trying to be fancy here. I'm just going to remove the DOM content loaded thing because I'm going to put this script tag below the body of the HTML where the button is going to be. So I think that should keep me safe. I don't need to change the inner text, and I don't need to append body either. I'm going to put that right in my HTML. So I want this to actually be a document get element by ID test, and we don't need that. So I'll take this and just import it. I'll create a button on both pages. And I can use the same ID here because these are separate documents. So I'll say button ID. A shortcut for this would be, the Emmet shortcut would be button hashtag for ID, and then give it the name, so test, and then hit enter, and it'll do that. And we can say test button. And then can add that script. So I'm going to use script type module, and it'll be ./source/test.js. And Vite will figure out the paths here for us. But that's part of the problem with the base URL, is that if Vite doesn't know about the base URL, it can't figure out the paths correctly because it doesn't actually know. So it's going to think / is localhost whatever, or your username.github.io, and not your username.github.io / something. So that's what the issue is here. Whether this was source or / source, it means the same thing. It means relative to where we are now, look for the source folder. And if we take this script and also put it in about index after the body, and we also put that button with that ID in there, we can find that if we remove this base, go ahead and build, see if we get any errors. Oops, yeah, so the source from about, obviously it's not going to be in the same directory, it's going to be in /source. And so we can build that. And everything builds fine, but when we go to preview, we should see an issue. On the home page, we're fine. We can click this button and it works. So we go to /about. We even get to /about fine. That's all good. And we test the button, and it seems to be working fine. But what's the issue here? So if we let's delete this and create it again. So we are looking at this on localhost 4173, and it's going to work. But think about this problem. When we go to GitHub Pages, suddenly they're going to put this base URL there, front-end portfolio. So it would be like they took our code, our docs code, and just put everything inside a new folder called front end portfolio. And we take all these contents here and just put them in that subfolder, and then we preview that again. And so now on the base, nothing is going to be at index, but of course at /front end portfolio something's going to be there. So we test the button, and what happens? Things are not working as expected. So why is that? Well, our functionality from the button was being created by a JavaScript script. And if we go into if we inspect element and we look at the network tab and we click reload, see what's happening, it's asking for different files, the HTML and the CSS, and we see that test something.js is not getting found. It's 404 error. So it's looking for localhost 4173 assets test.js, and we can even see that that's not working. So why is this happening? Who's asking for this code? We can actually copy that and look in our build assets. So this is going to look slightly different from our source code because it's a bundle from Vite. But we can use search in VS Code and search for this, and we find that we have two files, the about page and the home page, that makes sense, that use this particular JavaScript file. And so if we look at that, you notice that the way that they're doing this path is /assets/ and then the JavaScript file. So this means wherever our base URL is, add assets and test whatever JS. And since it thinks our base URL is not going to be at a subfolder like this, it looks for it in the base part right here. And so it's not picking up or noticing on the fact that we have this subfolder. So that's one of those challenging bugs that you may not see until you start using, for example, some JavaScript or some CSS, and then your bundler doesn't really know how to package things up correctly. So that's why it's important that you get that base URL piece right. So I'll go back and just delete the docs folder because we're going to regenerate it and put back the front end portfolio base in there, and then I will rebuild, and if that is successful I will npm run preview. So that was successful, and now the button works on both pages. So that solves that issue, and the only other issue here is organization, but because things are working pretty well, I'm ready to go and try publishing this on GitHub pages before I make any further changes. So a couple things that I want to do is I want to have the repository listed in the package.json. This just gives a pointer to where your code is going to be. So I can use the GitHub short format, which would be GitHub : my username njg4ne /front end portfolio. That's correct, and you can test that. If you go to the terminal now, you should be able to do npm repo and hit enter, and it should open your repo in the browser. So now I can see what's in the browser, and I could also add the home page for the pages site. I'll just leave that for now and do a git status, see where we're at. So I modified some code. I'm just going to git add dot git status git push scaffold, whoops, not git push, git commit -m scaffold site and publish from, and I'll just say place built site in docs folder. So last thing I want to do is have Jekyll skip over me in GitHub. So I'm going to add the no Jekyll file. I'm not sure completely if I trust the way the documentation is described for the no Jekyll file. So I want to create a new no Jekyll file in the root.nojekyll, JEKYLL. And I also want to have one built into the docs folder just in case, so I can copy this into the docs folder, but just in case they're actually looking for it where the static assets are. I'm not really sure whether they say in the base of the branch, but I think maybe because it's a subfolder they might look for it here. So I'm gonna put it in both places to be safe. I would prefer to know, but it's just better to be safe here. And going to vite build, and if that is successful, I'm going to touch, meaning create the file docs/nojekyll, and this needs to be done every time we build, because when we build we overwrite the docs folder. So even if we create this file once, it will get overwritten and deleted when that docs folder is reproduced. So we want to make sure that that works when we npm run build. And it seems to work fine. And we still have that nojekyll file there, and we have one here as well. So I'll git status, git add dot, actually git reset dot. I'm gonna git add package JSON, git commit -m, adding repo to package JSON, and I'll git add dot. Oh, I guess package JSON, that's not really a very good commit message. So how do we git undo last local commit? This seems right. Yeah, everything looks fine. Git log, and that commit, yeah, my last commit is gone. So I'm gonna fix that commit message, which was adding nojekyll creator to build script. Alright, and then I guess I added everything. Let's undo that one more time. And a base nojekyll. Git log. Can see this one and then this commit I just made. Looks good. Now I can git push and reload. My code should be here, and I can go to settings and start doing a couple things. First, I'll go to branches, add a branch rule set, protect main from unsigned commits, and I'm going to require signed commits and create. And does not target any resources and will not be applied. Add target, default branch. Yes, save. And I could protect all branches if I want. And because I actually think I don't have signed commits right now, I might not have them set up on this computer, but you should. Yeah, so I'm going to actually disable that rule just for myself, since it's just me on here anyway. Whoa, what happened to my rule set? Thought I created a rule set. here it is. So now I will deploy the pages site. Your repo will have to probably be public for this to work. And I'm going to deploy from the main branch the docs folder and enforce HTTPS. And this may take a little bit of time. I'm going to go back to code, and in the about, I'm going to use my GitHub pages site and save changes. And click on this. There it is. So it just took a second to build, and now it's all ready to go. Let's test it. Home works, about works, home works, /about works, go up one works, test button on home works, test button on about works. So that looks pretty great. Next, let's see how we can clean this up a bit, because as we start to create more individual projects or individual pages to our multi-page site, we're going to continue to have more subfolders at the root of this, and it's just going to get really messy. So we might want to put that in source, or we might want to put it in its own folder. So you could put it in source, or you could put it in source/HTML. I'm just going to make a folder called, let's say, markup, and put markup inside of source. And inside of source, we'll also create a folder called scripts, and we'll put a folder called styles, and put our JS file in scripts, put our HTML files, about and index, into markup. Now we're going to create some problems, because if we go to run this, we don't have any index files where Vite is looking for them. So we need to fix that. How do we do that? We go into the Vite config, and we mention that we want the base, where we're looking for our index files, to be a root of source. And it's still not going to work, because now we're looking in source and we're looking for our HTML files, where we should be looking in markup. source/markup/index.html. This is just for build, remember. So our default config needs to go where to look for that as well. And now we're getting the index file, but we probably won't get the about. Or we will. Let's see if we get this about. Yeah, so that's working, but this isn't being built yet. So our build options don't apply. So this is working fine. It's essentially asking, this root is saying for all of Vite, whether we're building or we're working in dev mode. Let's see. Yeah, I can't find source test.js. That makes sense. We'll fix that in a second. Whether we're working in, we're building or we're working in dev mode, we want to look for our base index.html at source markup. So now when we build, we're actually going to have to find the files that we want to build, and this is not going to work at first. So let's see that. So it could not resolve file index.html. So do we need to look in, is it going relative to source? So source slash markup slash index.html. It's actually going based on where the vite config file is, which is in root. So within root, there's a source folder and so on and so forth. And then hopefully that should be where it's going to be looking. And this should be an issue related to our JavaScript file, I believe. So let's see if we clear that up in the dev mode, whether that gets fixed. So inside of both HTML files, we're looking for source/test.js, but there's no source folder anymore relative to this. So we're going to have to look for, in the case of, where are we? We're in index.html, so we're in markup. We need to go /scripts/test.js. And then in the other one, we're going to have to go to /scripts.test.js. And now we're having no error here, it seems. And our test button, whoops, we were still having an issue. Where are we looking for /scripts? So it's looking in source/markup for everything. So it's going to be looking here for the JavaScript. So let's just have our index on. Let's just get rid of the markup folder. Go source. So no issues there. And then we go build. And we have no markup folder now. And now these are not in the right place either. Get rid of those dots, the first dots. And we're building. We're previewing, reload. Everything seems to work fine. And we're good. So now we have just an index file in source, and then we have a scripts folder, a styles folder for styles. Right now, if we just have one style sheet, we wouldn't necessarily need a folder. So I could create a new file like site-wide.css. That name is arbitrary. And then docs folder is now being put here when we build. So that's not what we want. We want it in the root of the project. So I'm going to delete this docs folder. And I'm going to specify here that I want the outdir to be /docs. So since we're in source here, it needs to be // and this one has to be the full path relative to the vite file. I don't think it would work if we just did /. So there we go. It works fine like that. And now we have our code coming in here. Now we can organize and just create subfolders. from the source folder, and then we'll just have our scripts and our styles at the top level. So how can we put some styles in here? Let's say we want to, at the root of the entire CSS, we are going to have, say that we support color scheme dark, so I like dark mode, and let's make our background color, I'll start with black and then change it here in VS Code to like a dark gray, and change the color, which is like the text color and such, to white. And nothing's showing here. We also aren't running our dev server, so I'll run the dev server, close the preview server, and reload. Nothing's happening. Makes sense because we haven't actually included the CSS. So I'll go into the head of our root HTML file and do link colon CSS, and we'll do /styles /sitewide.css, and now we get that style. And if I go to about, I'll lose it because it's a completely separate HTML file, so it's going to need its own completely separate link to the style sheet. So there's going to be a lot of boilerplate, and this is one of the downsides to a multi-page site, especially when you don't have a framework or like a front-end framework that will build all of these types of things for you. So now if we reload about, we need to go // and the reason that wasn't working was because it wasn't found, and you would have been able to see that if you had the console open and you see that network traffic, there was a CSS file you would see not being found, I would guess. Sitewide.css, yeah, I don't know, I guess it's not showing the issue, but that is the issue. And what else can we do here? I like sans serif fonts, so let's create, the root has sans serif fonts. So we'll pick Arial, Helvetica, sans serif. And I want to make all the fonts respect the user's font preference, but make them a little bigger. I think this will do that if we do font size. I think if we do one of these, it might, I think it might respect the user's font preference. X large is too large for me. Large is fine. And then I also don't love the way the button contrast is right now. It's a little hard to see the button, so let's go and add button background color, say black, but it ruins the natural button styles, so that's kind of annoying. Yeah, I'm just not going to mess with that. And text, though, is not getting large on there, so I think I'm going to have to I don't think button can inherit its size, so I'm going to do font size large there as well. And there shouldn't be any issue actually to just adding this as a, anything so far I have on the root is fine for a button as well. Oh no, I don't want the background color, so I guess I need to go back and put the font size here. So it'll inherit the sans serif, but I needed to do that to get it a little bit larger there. Liking the looks of that so far. Only thing I don't love is my links are this like red on active and they're purple on used, and then if I go to history and see if I clear the history for all time and go back, it'll show unvisited links are a different color as well. So I don't love that. the purple is fine, I like purple, but then when I visit a link, now it becomes this kind of pale purple. Let's see if we can fix that with the CSS. So we'll go anchor tag A, and we'll say color. It's going to make them purple except on a, say, so when we click we should get red. Yeah, I don't love that. And then visited blue. I definitely don't like that. That's very hard to see. So let's change visited to like a more brighter light purple so that it contrasts nicely. I guess that's pretty much what it was before. And then active, I can do this red is fine. It's kind of weird, but I have to do visited and active. Okay, that's what we needed. So now let's do active visited red. Maybe I just need visited higher. Maybe I just need it higher. The order matters, I suppose. Alright, so let's do like that light red maybe. Okay, that purple, I just don't like this purple now. Unvisited links. A little orange. I'm sure this is very thrilling to watch me pick my styles. Sure, that works. Now everything is visited, so it's boring. Okay, and then that looks good. So every time I add a new page, it's gonna have to have all those elements. My nav elements are a little close together for my preference. So I'm gonna create nav. I'm gonna say every nav, there's only gonna be one nav per page. So I'm just gonna select that by nav. And I'm gonna say every nav should be a flex box. And I'm gonna have it be, can I do a gap? 1 rem. Align items, center, that's gonna center it vertically, I guess. I believe. And it's gonna put a little padding around that. I only really want padding on the top. I'm gonna do padding top or padding block I should be able to do for top and bottom. And I'll do 0.5 rem. No, 0.5 rem for the padding, sorry. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And as it gets smaller, if there were a lot of these, I would want them to wrap around. So I don't need a background color. I'm just going to do flex wrap wrap. So that way, if I had a lot of these links, like this, and then my page gets small, width-wise, of course I'm just shy. Now they start to wrap around. So if I didn't have flex wrap, that row would not wrap around to the next two in that way. So it looks good. Pretty simple navigation. And it would probably make more sense to have a site title up at the top and then the navigation below that, and then have H2 say that we're home. Like this. So I'll just copy these here, make sure it works. Yeah, it's not the most beautiful thing, but it looks fine. Go to About, paste the nav and the, oops, and I didn't want to say home, I want to say front end portfolio P by Nicholas. But I think I want those on the same line, so I'm going to do a span element. I thought I would get a span. Oh, but these are block elements, so I need to make I need to make this not in a paragraph. I don't think that's right. I think I need to say ID author P and then add to the styles display no. The issue with the body being, this should be inline. Something there worked. So something being inline. What needed to be inline is the question. Putting it on all of them. So the span did not need to be inline. The H1 did need to be inline. And the paragraph needed to be inline. Interesting. Okay. What if I take that off? Alright. So I think that we're going to leave those classes on there. Front end portfolio by Nicholas, and probably would be better if this could wrap around if it needed to. Don't know if we'll get that. Probably should have just done a flex box, honestly. Let's say a div. call it ID equals title. This should all really be in a header. I don't think I should need the inline actually. I should just need title to have display flex. And align items baseline to put them at the bottom. And then gap 1 rem. Let's do half a rem. Except half an M, not half a rem. Did I use rem up here? I want an M. And then to flex wrap so that if this gets really small, like a phone size, then it'll wrap. But if it's not a phone size, it'll stay on the same line. Much cleaner, much cleaner. Get rid of these CSS classes that we don't need here, and get rid of that CSS. Looks good. A little bit, a lot of space going on here. Let's see, why is there so much space? If I inspect this, see these individual items, the H1 seems to be some margin. So P and H1, let's see, margin 0. That seemed to be the culprit. Some automatic margin on those. Except maybe I want to be a little more specific and say dot no margin. And then I'll add this class to those two specific ones. Looks good. So now I just need to take this whole header. Let's create a footer too while we're at it. That's not cute. Let's make footer have font size small. A little better. Let's also do, if we look at the box model, let's give it a little margin, like 2M. And maybe it could be centered. How could we center that? Padding. Inline auto? No. Text align center. Okay. Looks pretty good. Let's do margin top, no, margin block 1M. That looks pretty good. Oh, but it's not at the bottom of the site, so we need to have the entire page push this down. Stick to the bottom of the page. No, that doesn't work. I don't want to do that. Guess I just need to create a flex column that pushes this down. So I can make body a flex box. And the items will be header, all this stuff, and then this. So really this is our main content. Drag this around this. So we have main, we have header, main, and footer. And then we can just use flexbox on body. We'll do display flex, except flex direction is going to be a column, and we want the, see, is it the alignment? See, the alignment or the justification? I think it's justification. So justify the content with space between. No, is it justify items? Align items? Align content? What is it? Let's see. Oh, I think the flex box, it's not filling up the space because it's not big enough. So it has to be a min height of, see, if we were to put a color on this, background color, red, you'd see it's only taking up that much space. So it doesn't matter how it distributes these items because it's not taking up enough space. So we need a min height, not a height, but a min height so that it can get bigger if it needs to, of 100 VH. And now we have a scrolling problem because body automatically comes with a margin on it, so we need to set margin 0 so there's no scroll bar. Now if we like, we can put a padding on it so that we have the same visual effect of like 1M. Or like 0.75M. And then get rid of this horrible background color. And now we should be able to, what I thought was, hopefully it was justifying the content of space between. So that'll put the footer and the header. But now we have a problem, our padding, something. So it's pushing our items down here. Some issue with, wants to push that all the way down there. Why is that? It's because our font sizes are too large. No, that's not it. I don't really want space between anyway. I want well, maybe space around. I really just want this to be at the bottom. Everything else can be up high. So I think for that I'm going to put nothing and this say the footer should justify, oh, I already have that. I already have a footer. Say footer should justify self to end. No, align self. New. Justify self flex end. Thought that that would work. Oh, I need to flex grow. Is that right? Flex grow. 1. No. CSS is always a challenge. I always use the Flexbox playground to remember how these things work. So I add a couple items, I add column, and then I want to take this one and make it align self to flex end. That's not what I want. Flex basis, no. Flex grow, 1. I kind of wanted this, and then like, except I really want it to be at the text to be at the bottom. I mean, I guess I could just have a null item that pushes it down. I don't know if that's good practice though. This is just awful. So where are we? We want to, between main and footer, we need a div with style is flex, no, flex grow 1. Okay, so that did what I wanted. So this created, if I put a background color on this, this just created that a big item, a nothing item to kind of push this down. I think there should be, I thought there would be a better way to do this where you could just put this thing at the end of the flex box away from the other items, but it doesn't seem to want to let you do that. So I'm just gonna leave, I think this is okay practice to leave this kind of thing in here. And then can we get a padding on the flex box without ruining everything? That's the question. No, it doesn't like that. It wants to scroll us now. I think it's because there's a vertical padding being added, and so it's increasing the min height plus the padding is becoming too large. So I think we need to just have a padding. If we just did like a padding inline, meaning like the XY axis, I think we wouldn't have that problem. And then in terms of the top of it, we could just have the header item push itself down by an M. So there's nothing for the header. Let's say header. It would probably be, yeah, it would be good to have that in the header. Did I not create a flex box for that though? I called that title. Yeah, let's just put it on header. We'll put a margin on it so that it's not inside. The spacing isn't inside the object, it's outside of the header. Will be a margin margin block, meaning vertically, margin block of 1em, and that'll push it down from the main content below it as well. So now if we look at the box model, we should see that this header that's div title, this is body. I want to look at header. Yeah, so there, that yellow is that header is now pushing down a little bit, and then has some space below it as well. And then if we look at the main content, what's creating? Yeah, so the main content starts right there, and then the home page heading 2 is getting auto styled for as a heading 2, and I'm fine with that. Only thing is I want this button to not be on the same line as the link. I don't know why it would be on the same line. Yeah, so we want that button to be display block. I don't know why buttons wouldn't be display block. I guess we'll just use the ID test to make all test IDs. Let's use test, make those display block. And we'll give it a little bit of a margin block. Of 1em, so we don't want the left and right margin, we just want the up and down margin, and that way if we start to run into our footer, it'll push it down, and we'll have a little scroll bar so we have some space between the footer and the test button. Starting to look pretty decent. Now I'll get rid of that horrible background color. And I like the way this is coming along. Now the only thing now is I need to kind of duplicate this whole flex setup here. So I'm just gonna copy the, what should I do? Copy the entire body, all the things you can see, and I won't delete the new body for about. I'm just gonna put the things I want from about instead. So we want the text to be, this is the about page, and we want the content to have all of this stuff, except it's going to be an H2 instead of an H1. So I'll take that down to main, place this, and we still have our first body. That is not good practice, so we'll get rid of that. And there we are. So now it's duplicating this nav structure. We have this very semantic HTML of having a header, a main, and a footer inside of our body. It's using a flex box, so it's nice and responsive. We get a scroll bar if we absolutely need it, and we're using all the space on the screen, but we're also kind of handling when the screen, like for example here, if the screen gets to be a phone size, we'll use Flexbox to push that that by Nicholas or the words onto a new line, so we can resize that nicely. And I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. So will be the process here if we want to make more of these. Literally just could copy about, say demo, and then copy about into here actually. So create a demos folder, since we're going to have multiple demos on this site, and then instead of about, we'll rename that to say demo 1, or you could better name would be whatever the thing actually does. So we'll do demo 1 and then paste that again, demo 2, quickly change this to say that this is the demo 2 page, that dot dot isn't going to work because we're 2 layers deep with this demos subfolder, and our scripts are now not going to work either, so we'll need dot dot slash scripts slash test.js. Same for the other one, and this one will be the demo 2 page. Don't want the relative link because it would have to be like dot dot slash dot dot. And now we have no links to this on the home page, so we'll have to go to the home page and add some new hrefs for demo 1 and 2. So we'll do this. But now we're going to have to change our nav everywhere. That's the downside of this type of structure. And we need a trailing slash as well on that. Should probably test that nav. No CSS, so that makes sense because we didn't change our CSS link to be correct. It should be dot dot slash styles dot dot slash dot dot slash. Now it should work, and demo 2 should work. but we're losing those links when we go to other pages because we only change the nav on the home page. So let's go to the home page and copy the nav exactly. If we were using something like React, we could very easily reuse this code, but without using JavaScript, there's no way we can duplicate this. We can't import HTML into other HTML, unfortunately. So we'll change the nav there, change the nav here, change the nav in about as well. And now our final step for adding those new pages, should probably test this. Okay, all these are working. Test button works on all the demos because we fixed the JavaScript link. And now /about, does our go up to button work? Yep, it takes us to the home page because demo was nested under demos/demo2, so we have to go up 2 pages to get back to home. If we just went to demos, there's no index file in demos, so we would get an issue there. Let's see. And the final thing is we need to fix the building, because when we build, we're gonna lose our, you'll see in docs, we don't have our demos folder. So that's because we didn't tell the bundler that we created new files. I'm just gonna close everything, open the vconfig, and we're gonna add demos. I don't know if this will work. Do I have to do... I don't know if it's using this key for anything. I know it's looking for main as a special key, but I don't know if it cares about these other keys. So we'll do source demos. Yeah, it seems to have created a demos folder, and it has demo 1. Yeah, so it didn't really care, I guess, what those keys were called. So I'll build and npm run preview. And looks good. Start to visit these links, and they will go purple. Everything should be the same from everywhere. Have my footer. Looks pretty good. So now just gonna push my source code changes only. I could have been more granular with my commits here, but I'm just gonna git commit -m. What did I do? I styling semantic consistent nav and 2 demo pages. Now I will git add docs and git commit -m publish changes to built site. So keep in mind, everything except the docs folder is our source code and other configuration files, and then the docs folder is where our actual static assets that the web server is going to be serving for us. So these are just files, and these are done for now. Our developer environment doesn't matter anymore once we build those assets. And that's because we configured GitHub to look in that docs folder. So I'll git push. Hopefully with that no Jekyll file, we should see the changes pretty quickly redeploying. See that if we look in here, we have a deployment 49 minutes ago, and we have one in progress now. So it's queued up, but it's not done yet. So I have to wait to retest this. Oh, and it seems like it's pretty much done now. Maybe because we have no Jekyll, it's serving that stuff to us right away, which is what we want. So now everything seems to be working from our deployed site because we were really careful about testing everything and making sure everything was set up in a way that was bound to work in GitHub pages as well. So what's something that I can do here? Let's just make an interactive feature for one of those demo pages. So I'm going to go to demo 1 and I'm going to rename it something more informative, like demos/clock. And I'm going to need to change that everywhere, obviously. So maybe that's not the best place to start. Let's start with our build. We're going to call this clock demo, and it'll be demo/clock/index.html. Then this folder just needs to be renamed to clock, and we could add our script in the scripts folder, or I could just add my script right here in this this folder. It makes more sense probably to do that. So I'll just say I could create a scripts folder in here as well, and then there's lots of ways to lay things out. I'm just going to create a file right here called clock.js, and then in the file I'm going to fix the nav and copy it everywhere else. So I'll call this clock and clock demo, and we'll take our nav and copy and paste it to the demo 2, to the demo, the about demo. I could also create a script to do this automatically and just have one script, but the problem with that is then this isn't going to be immediately viewable by like a search engine indexer. It's going to have to be run in some sort of client in order to get that. Got clock there, we got clock here, we got clock here, a lot of index files to keep track of. We could also, I think we can control F, no, there's a keyboard shortcut, control shift P, search Explorer. I don't know, there's a way to search the Explorer, so you could search for all files that are called index.html, but I don't know what it is at this moment. So I'm gonna run the dev server so I can see what's going on. And everyone seems to know about the clock demo, so that's good. But the clock demo is not actually a clock, so that's not good. Let's close all and then just open the clock. We will create a semantic HTML element, so we'll use the time element, and the date time is going to be empty to begin with, but we'll set it with JavaScript. So now we can go into our script file, but first let's link our script file. So we don't really need our test.js script anymore because we're not using that button. So I'm just going to say /clock.js, and then I'm using type module because I want to use module syntax inside of here, like if I were to do import rather than require. if you're doing require, I will know that you're copying code from the internet. So I could use import to import a module, but I don't need any modules, so I'm going to just create a function called update time element, and it will get the time element, get by ID time. No, I want to actually query selector because I'm only going to have one time element on the page. So I'm just going to select it by its tag name, which is time. And I will, if there were multiple times, it would just only do the first one it finds. Query selector rather than query selector all would get all time elements on the page. This will just get one. So I can say const time of now is new date, or date.now would be another way. And then I can do text content to locale time string, and then we'll also do time element dot date time. Just set that in case anyone's looking at that to what the current ISO string of that is, and then that should be good. So I don't expect this to come back undefined because I wrote the HTML. And then I will just make a recursive function. So function recursive update. So it's going to update the time element. Request frame animation. Nope, that is not what I want to do. So what I want to do is set a timeout, and it's going to, well, first of all, it's going to run update time, and then it's going to set a timeout for every second to call itself, which would update the time and then call itself again, and then that would update the timing. So this will go on forever. But it's only going to happen every second, so we shouldn't get any sort of like Stack Overflow or anything. Let's check that it works. So if we don't have this script, we should just see an empty time element, so we should see nothing on the demo2 page, or the clock demo page, which should be called clock demo. And let's see, p this demo makes a clock that updates a time element with a recursive function. I have that date time right there. Currently you can't see it because there's nothing in it. So when I include this script, magic should start to happen. And no magic. So what's the bug? Well, we didn't call recursive update for the first time, so we need to call that once. And there we go. So if I took out this recursive call, it would just update once and then stop. But since it's calling itself, it'll keep doing that every second. And if I inspect element and look at the clock portion, you can see that both the date time attribute is there in the ISO format, and then also the friendly format is being updated, and that flash is that event occurring every time that set timeout event runs out. So it looks pretty good. And I actually want the time to be bigger, but I don't want to make it a heading because that would be not very semantic. It wouldn't represent the meaning of this. This isn't really an H2 or an H1 just because I want big text. So I'm just going to manually make the text bigger. So I'll go to my site-wide CSS, which is being included here because I see all my styles, and I can simply do a time for select every time that there is. There is going to be font size, let's do extra large. And that's not even big enough for me, so let's go like 40M. Way too big. 4M, more reasonable. And if the screen gets too small, I don't really know what's going to happen, to be honest. Yeah, it just overflows to the new line. It's kind of ugly. But what else would you expect? All right. Looks pretty good. So then this, I just added a new feature and I've tested it on the development. So I'm going to quickly test it by building and previewing, make sure everything still works as well. Yep, still works. My nav is consistent across all the pages. So I feel confident about that. I'm going to git status and I'm going to git, I'm just going to add everything, git add dot, git commit dash m, adding clock feature to demos. Pretty good. All right. So now I can check that that worked. Maybe our NoJekyll will let us see it really quickly. Let's see. No, I'm still seeing demo 2. So we have a deployment perhaps working on itself at the moment. It may take a bit for this to update. There's our clock demo, and it hasn't been visited, so now we see, and it works fine. So pretty good. You can see how all of that can be done with vanilla JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and you can have a multi-page site. And you know, one of the benefits to this is that if we look at our bundle, you can see how we have this, you know, your index file as you would expect in the SVG in the base, but then you have the directory structure exactly as you would expect it, and you have all those HTML files spelled out. Whereas if you had a single page app, you would just have an index, and then JavaScript would edit all your HTML for you in this single index file. So you get a little bit of a performance benefit from splitting your site like this, because now you only have to get one of those HTML files and one of the whatever JavaScript is relevant at a time. And you notice that there are multiple JavaScript bundles being created here depending on where the code is going. So it's not just one big JavaScript bundle, it's a bunch of little JavaScript bundles that go that are specifically attached to each HTML file. And you'll see when you look at that, it's sort of some gibberish that you didn't write yourself, that the bundler created for you, and that's just it connecting whatever CSS or JavaScript that you brought in, and then it kind of creating that into one thing. So there may be some duplication with this. I don't know if it's smart with the CSS and it's realizing what CSS it can reuse. Like for example, it could reuse this file and this one. It might be something that we could look into in the future, but overall it's pretty good setup for what we're trying to do here, which is create multiple different sites where we can have our own HTML and not have this giant HTML file. Imagine if we had one site, either we would have to have an index and change it with a JavaScript file or lots of JavaScript files, or we would have to have just a huge index file with all of our standard markup that's very easy for, you know, browser and a search engine crawler to read, and we'd have this huge like 900 line HTML file and then a bunch of different JavaScript files doing different things, and it would just be really heavy and very hard to work on the code as well. So with this approach, the multi-page site, you can easily create small little demo apps where they have their own HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, And then the bundler can just throw it all together into one big pile so that you can have everything in one place. And the only downside or challenge is that if you want to have a consistent nav across your site, you're just going to have to make sure that your HTML has the same nav code everywhere and make sure that gets updated as you add more pages. And then you're also going to have to make sure that your CSS and can be imported in all those different places consistently, and that your JavaScript is correctly imported based on the relative paths in your file structure. But I think that's going to wrap it up once I push this code, or did I already push it? Did I even change those? I guess, oh, I use the formatter. So just a point on, if you're not getting nice formatting, if you put something out of correct tabbing and you hit Control S, you save, and you don't see this get corrected, either your syntax is wrong in your HTML or CSS file, or you don't have formatting configured. So a way to do that is in Settings, you can look for Auto Save, and save on format on save. You want to make sure that's checked, and you also want to make sure you have a default formatter for whatever type of file you're in. So if you right click the file, format document with, and then you click configure default formatter, you can make sure it's using the default formatter that you want, whether you want to install Prettier, which is a common one that people like, or if you just want to use the built-in HTML formatter, if there is one. Default language features, or I could use Prettier and make it use that as well. And then you can also set a default formatter in Settings, and our editor default can just be Prettier, for example. So let's check. Yep, our clock demo was here in GitHub Pages, so that's good for this video. I hope that this has helped you if you were struggling to understand the multi-page site and all the things that go into it and all the different steps involved in setting up your relationship between your Git repo and your Pages site and your source code on your computer. And also we went through some new things, like showing you how to do some semantic HTML, some basic styling, and structuring your project in a way that it's going to be more manageable as you continue to add sub projects to it. So thank you for watching.